The apex predator. The Galactic Council chamber was silent. The usual chatter of bureaucrats, military strategists, and planetary representatives had faded into an eerie stillness. A massive hologram floated above the council table, rotating slowly, an image of a creature so feared that its very name sent shivers down the spines of even the most war-hardened species. The Xythera, towering beasts, standing nearly 4 meters tall on their hind limbs, their bodies a mass of corded muscle and overlapping armored plates. Razor-sharp talons, eyes that gleamed with an unsettling intelligence. Xythera weren't just apex predators. They were the undisputed rulers of death worlds, the kind of planets no species dared to colonize. Ambassador Vokshan of the Xelvery cleared his throat, his insectoid mandibles clicking in unease. These creatures, he began, gesturing toward the hologram, have annihilated every force that has attempted to challenge them. The Prolith tried to exterminate them with orbital bombardments. Their fleet was torn apart when the Xythera hurled debris into orbit, destroying their warships. The Vorge attempted biological warfare. The Xythera adapted. Every species in this chamber knows the same truth. We do not go near their worlds. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. Every species had its own horror stories, except for the humans. Seated at the far end of the table, the human delegation had remained silent, observing. Their leader, Ambassador Henry Cole, leaned forward slightly, steepling his fingers. "We understand the dangers," he said. His voice was calm, measured, which is why our mission to study them is purely observational. Ambassador Vokshan scoffed. "Observation? You think you can study death incarnate?" "We have ways," Cole replied cryptically. The discussion ended with a final warning. No species should approach Xythera-controlled planets. It was a death sentence. Death World 672b//Xythera Habitat / Human Research Team. Dr. Elise Carter adjusted her helmet, the visor displaying atmospheric readings. Toxic levels of nitrogen oxide. Gravity slightly heavier than Earth's. The kind of planet that could crush a lesser species. Her research team moved carefully through the dense jungle-like terrain. The trees were twisted, their bark reinforced like organic steel. The air buzzed with unseen predators lurking in the undergrowth. But their focus was on one predator in particular, a massive Xythera alpha. They had been tracking it for days, using drones and long-range cameras. The creature had already demonstrated intelligence beyond anything recorded. It laid traps. It used the terrain. It learned. But something was different this time. Elise crouched behind a rock, raising her binoculars. The alpha stood at the edge of a watering hole, its black exoskeletal plates gleaming in the dim light. Normally, Xythera hunted alone, killing anything that came close. Yet it stood, watching them. "I don't like this," muttered Sergeant Reynolds, the team's security officer. His rifle remained trained on the beast. "It knows we're here." "I think it's studying us," Elise whispered. The Xythera tilted its head, its piercing amber eyes locking onto hers. There was no hostility, no sign of an imminent attack, just curiosity. Elise's heart pounded. This was unprecedented. No records had ever described a Xythera observing another species without attacking. Then, it did something that froze her blood. It took a step closer. Galactic Council Data Archive / Xythera Behavior Report / Entry 1441. Xythera are hyper-aggressive apex predators. No recorded peaceful interactions with any sentient species. Do not engage. Do not approach. Do not assume intelligence beyond predatory instinct. Elise didn't move. If she ran, it would trigger a chase. If she raised her weapon, it would see her as a threat. Instead, she did the unthinkable. She lowered her weapon. The team behind her gasped. Reynolds tensed, his finger tightening on the trigger. The Xythera let out a low, rumbling sound, a noise that vibrated through the very ground beneath them. It wasn't a roar. It wasn't a growl. It was acknowledgement. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature turned and walked away. Elise let out a shaky breath. That, she whispered, was not an attack. Reynolds exhaled, shaking his head. No, it wasn't. For the first time in galactic history, a Xythera had seen a sentient being and chosen not to kill. And Elise had a feeling it wasn't the last time. A dangerous understanding. Elise Carter sat in the dimly lit research tent, staring at the holo footage looping on her datapad. The Xythera Alpha, standing there, watching her, acknowledging her. The moment played over and over again, each repetition deepening the implications. It had seen her. It had chosen. No previous records documented anything like this. The Xythera were known for their sheer brutality, their instinctual need to dominate and destroy. Yet, in that brief encounter, there had been no aggression, only curiosity. The rest of the research team, however, wasn't as eager to believe. "You got lucky," Sergeant Reynolds said, arms crossed. His weathered face was lined with skepticism. "We've all seen the reports. Those things don't hesitate to rip anything apart. Maybe this one just wasn't hungry." Elise shook her head. That wasn't just luck. It recognized something. Something different. Reynolds scoffed, shifting his rifle as he leaned against the table. "You think it recognized you? Come on, document. That's a 4-meter-tall killing machine, not a lost puppy." Elise leaned forward, tapping the screen. "Look at its posture. It wasn't in an aggressive stance. It wasn't displaying dominance. It was analyzing me, trying to understand." Dr. Patel, the team's xenobiologist, exhaled deeply. "All right, let's assume, for a second, that you're right. That this wasn't just a random encounter. What are you suggesting? That the Xythera can be reasoned with?" Silence fell over the tent. Elise took a deep breath. "I don't know yet, but I want to find out." Reynolds groaned. "You want to go back out there? You insane." She met his gaze, unwavering. "We came here to study them. That's exactly what I'm going to do." Return to the wild. The next morning, Elise and her team ventured back into the dense terrain, this time with a new objective. Not just to observe, but to engage. Drones hovered overhead, scanning for any movement. The jungle's oppressive heat pressed down on them, thick with the scent of damp earth and alien flora. Every sound made the team flinch, distant screeches of predators, the rustling of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. Elise led the way, gripping her scanner tightly. The readings from the previous encounter indicated that the Xythera Alpha had remained in the area. It was waiting. Hours passed before they found it. The Alpha stood atop a jagged rock formation, bathed in the planet's twin moon's eerie glow. It turned its head slowly as Elise approached, its piercing amber eyes locking onto Hayes once again. She took a deep breath and did the unthinkable. She stepped forward. Reynolds whispered urgently behind her. "Elise, what the hell are you doing?" She ignored him. The Alpha let out a deep, rumbling growl. Not a warning, but a statement. A test. Elise did something no sane person in the galaxy would do. She reached out her hand. Reynolds cursed under his breath, gripping his rifle tightly, ready to shoot if things went sideways. For what felt like an eternity, the Xythera simply watched her. The low growl faded into silence. Then, slowly, deliberately, it took a step forward. Elise's heartbeat thundered in her ears. The creature's sheer size was overwhelming. If it wanted to, it could kill her in an instant. But it didn't. Instead, it did something no one had ever seen before. It lowered its head. Elise barely breathed as the massive predator moved closer, until its armored snout was mere inches from her extended hand. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it nudged her palm. The moment shattered every known fact about the Xythera. Gasps erupted from the team behind her. Reynolds muttered something that sounded like a prayer. Elise let out a shaky laugh. "Holy hell!" The Xythera let out a deep, rumbling exhale, almost like a huff of amusement. It had accepted her. Galactic shockwaves. Back at the research base, Elise replayed the footage over and over again. There was no mistaking it. She had made physical contact with a Xythera, and it had chosen not to attack. The implications were staggering. When the footage was transmitted back to the Galactic Council, the response was immediate. Within hours, every major news network across the known galaxy was broadcasting the impossible. Human scientists pets the apex predator. The council chambers were in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued, debated, and flat-out denied what they had seen. Ambassador Vokshan's mandibles clicked furiously. This is a fabrication, a trick. The humans must have sedated the beast. Ambassador Cole leaned back in his chair, a smug grin playing at the corner of his lips. We didn't sedate it. We didn't control it. We simply did what humans do best. And what is that? Vokshan snapped. Cole chuckled. We made a friend. The uproar that followed was deafening. But Elise wasn't thinking about politics. She was thinking about the Xythera Alpha, the way it had regarded her, the intelligence in its eyes. This was only the beginning, and she was going to prove to the galaxy that the Xythera weren't just mindless killers. There was something far more extraordinary, the bond that shouldn't exist. The research outpost was in chaos. Elise Carter's footage of her unprecedented encounter with the Xythera Alpha had spread like wildfire, shaking the foundations of what the galaxy believed about the apex predators. Some hailed it as a breakthrough. Others, like the Galactic Council's more conservative factions, were calling for immediate containment or extermination. But Elise wasn't interested in politics. She was already preparing to return to the jungle. Risking it all? Are you actually insane? Reynolds hissed, blocking her path outside the research tent. That thing could have eaten you, Elise. And now you want to go back for a casual meet and greet. Elise adjusted the straps of her field pack and met his gaze with unwavering determination. You saw the footage, Reynolds. That wasn't aggression. That was intelligence. Curiosity. We have a chance to change everything we know about the Xythera. Reynolds ran a hand down his face. Yeah? Or you have a chance to become lunch. Dr. Patel, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. Reynolds, we have to consider the possibility that Elise is right. If the Xythera can be reasoned with, even domesticated in some form, it could change how we interact with hostile species across the galaxy. Reynolds exhaled sharply, clearly torn. Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if that thing so much as twitches the wrong way, I'm putting a hole in its head. Elise gave a small smile. Fair enough. A second encounter. The jungle was just as humid, just as oppressive as before. But this time, Elise wasn't walking blindly into the unknown. The Xythera Alpha had waited for her last time. Would it do so again? As they approached the rocky outcrop where the last encounter had taken place, Elise scanned the surroundings carefully. Her pulse quickened. The Alpha was already there. It stood tall, its massive, armored frame blending into the shadows. The amber eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Waiting, watching, Elise took a slow step forward. Reynolds tensed behind her, rifle ready. The Alpha let out a deep, guttural growl, not of warning, but of recognition. Elise took another step and, against every survival instinct in her body, lowered herself onto one knee, making herself appear smaller, less threatening. The Alpha tilted its head. Then, to everyone's shock, it moved closer. Elise held her breath as the towering predator approached, its heavy footfalls making the ground tremble slightly. It stopped just a meter away, observing her with unnerving focus. Then, slowly, it lowered its head once more. Elise reached out, her fingers brushing against the creature's snout. The moment stretched into eternity. The Xythera let out a low rumble, not aggressive, not fearful. Something else, something almost gentle. The team behind her was speechless. Reynolds whispered, "You've got to be kidding me." But Elise barely heard him. She was transfixed by the realization that was dawning on her. This wasn't just an apex predator. This was a sentient being making a conscious decision to trust. And it had chosen her. The Council's interference. Back at the outpost, the moment Elise uploaded the new footage, the situation escalated. Her discovery had officially crossed a line. A transmission from the Galactic Council came in less than an hour later. Ambassador Vokshan's face appeared on the holo-screen, his compound eyes glaring. "This experiment of yours has gone far enough, Dr. Carter." His voice was laced with barely restrained anger. "The Xythera are a galactic threat. You risk exposing us all to their unpredictable nature." Elise clenched her fists. "With all due respect, Ambassador, what I'm risking is outdated thinking. The Xythera aren't just monsters. They have intelligence. Restraint. I have proof. Vukshan's mandibles clicked sharply. Proof that a single instance of non-violence means anything. This is reckless human arrogance at its finest. The Council is preparing an extermination directive. You will cease all contact with the Xythera immediately. Elise's stomach dropped. You can't be serious. I am deadly serious, Vukshan snapped. You have 48 hours to vacate the planet. After that, we will cleanse the area. The screen cut to black. Elise stayed at it, heart pounding. The Council wasn't just skeptical. They were afraid. Afraid of what she had uncovered. And they were willing to wipe out an entire species just to maintain the status quo. She turned to her team. We can't let this happen. Reynolds groaned. Oh, hell. Here we go. Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses, his expression serious. Are you suggesting we defy the Council? Elise straightened, her resolve hardening. I'm saying we have 48 hours to prove them wrong. If we don't, the Xythera, all of them, are going to be wiped out. Silence fell over the room. Then, slowly, Reynolds shook his head with a rueful chuckle. You really know how to drag a guy into trouble, don't you? Elise smiled. Only when it's worth it. Because this time, she wasn't just fighting for discovery. She was fighting for the survival of an entire species, defying the Council. The countdown had begun. The Galactic Council's extermination directive loomed over them like a death sentence, giving them less than 48 hours to change the course of history or witness the extinction of an entire species. Elise Carter wasn't about to let that happen. A desperate plan. Inside the research outpost, Elise, Reynolds, and Dr. Patel worked frantically. I hacked into the Council's live surveillance feeds. Reynolds muttered, fingers flying over the terminal. They've already mobilized orbital strike teams. If we don't act soon, it's over. Dr. Patel looked up from his datapad. The Xythera Alpha must know something's wrong. If they sense the incoming attack, they might retaliate. And if that happens, Elise finished the thought grimly. The Council gets the excuse they want. They'll brand the Xythera as a galactic menace and wipe them out entirely. Reynolds exhaled. Then what's the plan? Because I don't think diplomacy's gonna cut it with a bunch of trigger-happy bureaucrats. Elise's mind raced. There was only one way to prove that the Xythera weren't mindless killers. We bring the Alpha to the Council. Both men stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Dr. Patel adjusted his glasses. You mean, off-world? As in, into the capital itself? Elise nodded. Yes. The Council fears them because they don't understand them. But if we bring undeniable proof of their intelligence, if the Alpha chooses to stand with us, they'll have no choice but to reconsider. Reynolds ran a hand down his face. You want to smuggle the galaxy's most feared predator onto a diplomatic station? You really are insane. Elise smirked. I prefer relentless. The Alpha's decision. The team raced back into the jungle, the weight of the ticking clock pressing down on them. Elise didn't know if the Alpha would even listen. But she had to try. The massive predator was waiting for them when they arrived, standing atop its usual rocky outcrop. The amber eyes locked onto Elise, as if sensing her urgency. She stepped forward. We don't have much time, she said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. A great danger is coming, one that will destroy your kind. The Council believes you're a threat. If we don't stop them, they will erase your entire species. The Xythera tilted its head, muscles tensing. Elise took a deep breath and pressed on. But we can stop them. Together. If you come with me, if you show them that you can choose peace, they might listen. They might let your people live. The jungle was silent. The weight of the moment stretched between them. Then, the Alpha moved. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped closer until it loomed over her, mere inches away. Its deep amber eyes locked onto hers. And then, it bowed its head. Reynolds sucked in a breath. Dr. Patel whispered, unbelievable. Elise felt her heart hammer against her ribs. The Alpha understood. And more than that, it had chosen to trust her. All right, she said, voice thick with emotion. Let's change the galaxy. Breaking into the Council's stronghold, smuggling the Xythera Alpha off-world was no easy feat. They hijacked a supply shuttle, using falsified credentials to clear planetary security. The moment they reached the diplomatic station, alarms blared. The council wasn't happy. Elise, flanked by Reynolds and Patel, stormed into the council chambers. Behind her, the Xythera Alpha prowled forward, its presence a living challenge to everything the galaxy believed. Ambassador Vokshan reeled back in horror. You brought it, hey. This is an act of treason. Elise stood her ground. No, this is proof that you're wrong. The entire chamber fell into stunned silence. The Xythera moved forward, not in attack, not in rage, but with purpose. It lowered its head, slowly and deliberately, in a gesture of peace. The ambassadors watched, eyes wide, as the so-called apex predator willingly showed restraint. Elise turned to them. You call them mindless beasts, but look at it. It is choosing peace. You want to destroy them out of fear. But fear is not justification for genocide. Vokshan's mandibles twitched. You expect us to trust this creature. Elise stepped forward. Not just trust. Understand. If the Xythera can choose cooperation over violence, then we must do the same. The council murmured among themselves. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Ambassador Lorik of the Avarian Dominion stood. I vote to rescind the extermination order. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. One by one, others followed. The tide was turning. Finally, Vokshan scowled, but relented. The extermination order is revoked. A weight lifted from Elise's chest. They had won. A new beginning. Hours later, standing beside the Xythera Alpha, Elise gazed out of the diplomatic station's viewport. Below them, the jungle world remained untouched. Safe. Reynolds shook his head with a chuckle. Well, that's one hell of a way to make history. Dr. Patel nodded. And it's just the beginning. Elise turned to the Alpha, who watched the stars with the same quiet intensity as before. You changed everything, she whispered. The Xythera let out a deep, resonant purr, a sound that, just days ago, no one would have believed possible. Because humans hadn't just befriended an apex predator. They had redefined what it meant to coexist.